Why this amount? City completed a cost of service study. We determined that our true operating costs could not be supported by a current rate structure. We looked at a unit cost by cost center basis. So each water supply, each treatment system on the wastewater side was looked at. How much does it cost to operate it? Can we operate it more efficiently? We looked at opportunities to reduce those O&M expenses. We're an enterprise fund, water and wastewater, but we do incur interdepartmental costs. We have support from finance. We have support from legal. We need to look at providing those cost recoveries. Otherwise, there's the issues that we have in hand today, which is the high-end water users are not covering their cost of service. It's causing our operating costs to go up and then ultimately causing a subsidy from the general fund, which is what's happening today.
Sean, did you have a citizens committee?
I did, and I'm going to briefly touch on what their issues were. But again, our water production costs, just very quickly, we have very cheap water. We have very expensive water in the city. A lot of our cheaper supplies have been impacted by the Superfund. We lost 4 of our lowest cost water resources. We've had to replace those with our higher cost water. The ones that I circled in red there are our reverse osmosis facilities. Very, very high cost. Drives up our total water production cost over and above what our expenditures are. Again, just very quickly, you've looked at this before. This is a supply versus demand chart. We've plotted the price of water. You can see our lowest cost water is at 82 cents a thousand. Our most expensive water is at $5.33 a thousand. And that blue line that kind of goes through the middle is what our summer flows, winter flows look like. So in the summertime, it requires us to put on our more expensive supplies. And in the wintertime, it affords us the opportunity to shut those supplies off. So what we've done is we're cycling off our reverse osmosis in the winter. That's our most costly supply. But unfortunately, in the summer, we have to put those online to meet those high-end water users' demands. That's why we want to make a shift in this rate structure to provide that cost recovery. Our demand has slowed. We've still seen increases last summer, 2 to 5%. So while the city's overall growth is slowed even more than that, we've got infill, we've got existing homes that as those turn over, as those homes are sold, we're seeing demands. So we're projecting 4% average annual increases over 4 years. We may ultimately be a little less this year, but I think the goal is over a 4-year period, we're going to average about 4%. We've reduced our capital that we need to support that from 55 down to 16. And obviously, at a slower growth rate, inflation can have a little bit more of a detrimental effect to us. If inflation runs at 5 or 6%, utility cost, APS, 8-9% increases require us to increase our rates. Revenues, by reducing our growth rate, we've reduced the amount of money we'll collect. So we've seen at 10%, we would have collected about $11 million more than we're going to collect it at 4%. So what we've done proactively is we've reduced expenses by about $10 million. We're refinancing some of our debt, we're phasing in some of our programs, and we're reducing our O&M expenses. This is all in an effort to try to keep the rate increases as low as possible. So some of the rate design, and to answer Councilmember Holland's question, we did include a customer committee, a citizens committee. They provided us some goals. They didn't make specific recommendations, raise this rate, lower this rate, but they looked at kind of philosophy. What do you want us to focus on? So the citizen committee, we had 4 meetings. They ranked their pricing objectives. When we develop as staff working with the consultant a rate structure, what do you want our pricing objectives to be like? And their objectives were look at peak usage reduction, create a conservation rate that rewards low-end water users, and if the high-end water users need the water, we can provide it, but it'll be at a higher cost. That helps with peak usage reduction. Water conservation, making sure that we have revenue stability, and then cost of service equity, that we're not having one rate customer class, a low-end residential user subsidizing a high-end residential user. And we have a breakdown on those bills in a few minutes. So some of the policy issues that we've talked to the City Council on numerous occasions about is enterprise funds should include debt service. We need to maintain some level of operating reserves. We have to reimburse our general fund partners. We have to reimburse finance. We have to reimburse HR. That's our responsibility. And then we also need to fund a replacement reserve. So when the infrastructure that we get built today by the development community needs to be replaced, when we have a wastewater treatment plant be expanded through impact fees, that's great. But in 30 years or 50 years when that needs to be replaced, we can't go back to the developer and say, could you build us another one? We have to replace that infrastructure. So we need to start saving for that today and we're looking at 1 to 2%, phasing that in over time as well. So the big issue that we've talked about again is the last study's goal was to provide self-sufficiency, and we didn't get there. Why? The big issue is it focused on the O&M. The last study focused on what were our operating expenses. They didn't look at, and the big thing is they didn't look at our debt coverage, our debt requirement. The thought was we would fund general obligation bond infrastructure, and that the collection of impact fees would be sufficient to cover that debt service. It's not. So the city and staff is making the recommendation is we shift to a revenue bond that is tied to the amount of revenues we generate. So we can't overspend. We can't go out and borrow $100 million worth of infrastructure if we don't have revenues to support that. So we can't get too far in front of ourselves. There's a debt coverage requirement that's in there. So that's a little bit of added protection. And then it also takes the obligation of covering that debt away from the general obligation side and affords the city the opportunity to fund non-utility projects. Let the utility fund utility projects. That's the big issue. That's our recommendation. So you saw this slide last March at the advance. We haven't gotten there. Our debt coverage, our debt payments have exceeded what we thought we would have for revenues. Again, that was a function of the general obligation bonds. There is a subsidy. We're looking to end that subsidy. Our recommendation is to phase that out over 2 years. And we've got a 4-year rate study in front of you tonight that will afford us that opportunity. So impacts on rates, we can make one large adjustment one time and fix everything at once. Provide that replacement fund, switch the debt service coverage from general obligation to revenue bonds. We could do all the things we need to cover our operating expenses, but a one-time increase would be rate shock. So we're recommending a 4-year rate increase. We want to assume that property tax subsidy will be phased out over the first 2 years. So we're going to need it as a bridge, but we're going to develop the revenue and the structure that's necessary to end that subsidy. And then we want to phase in our indirect costs as well over the next 2 years. And we talked about this at the council advance actually last year. And then one thing we want to do for the next 4 years is look at allocating a portion of the general fund reserve, kind of our contingency fund, using the general fund's contingency as kind of our contingency. Phase that in after 4 years. Again, developing a reserve today would require a larger increase. We're trying to minimize the shock to the citizens. So use the city's overall contingency fund for both the utility and non-utility purposes. So this is the meat of the presentation. I wanted to move very quickly and thank you. Monthly fixed cost, these are based off of water meter sizes. Again, the larger meters require the larger volumes of water. So those increases are larger in proportion to the smaller end users. A typical residence.
Okay, go ahead. You were just going to say it.
A typical residence is 3/4. There are some residents that use 1 inch. There's probably a handful of homes that may require 1.5 inches. That's a function of number of plumbing fixtures in a home. There's a universal plumbing code that says if you have so many toilets, so many sinks, you add them all up. That tells you the amount of water you need, and that tells you the size of the meter that you have to deliver that water. So that's just a straight up calculation. But most homes are 3/4 to 1 inch. What we've done here is this is one of the structural things that we're changing. We have an inclining block rate, conservation rate, which means the more water you use, the more expensive it becomes to use it. And that's in direct relationship to the more expensive our water resources are as the demand goes up. If our demand is low in the wintertime when we run it, about half of what our summertime demands are, we can run our cheaper, more inexpensive water resources and not turn on that high expensive RO. But we have to have a rate structure in place that says if the citizens or the businesses or the people who require that water request it, we have to deliver it, but we have to recover our cost. So what we've done is we've changed the blocks. The existing blocks are 8, 12, 10, and 30, which means if you used 9,000 gallons, you would pay 8,000 gallons today at $1.76 a thousand, and then you would pay 1,000 gallons at $2.70. We've switched that, and we've done that based off of what our residents use. The typical residents in Goodyear is about 8,000 gallons. Our low-end water users are about 4,000, and our typical high-end residential users are 10 or 12,000. So we've tried to incorporate the majority of our residential customers in our first 2 tiered rates. So you can see our rates have actually gone down a bit. The tier rate has gone down. The first 6,000 is at $1.27. The next 6,000 is at $2.54. And then as the demand starts to creep up, that's when our expenses go disproportionately higher. So we've raised those 3rd and 4th tiers. quite a bit from where they are today. Commercial. In the city today, we have two customer classes. We have residents and everybody else. So we have a commercial customer today is non-residential. What we're looking to do, and one of the recommendations from the Citizens Committee, is looking at splitting that out. So we're proposing an irrigation class, and I have a slide on that in a minute. But with our customers, our commercial customers, again, we're trying to shift that burden to the high-end commercial users. They're the ones that are requiring us to put on our high-cost water. We need to recover those costs. And I have a slide that shows the percentage of customers per each class, and I'll get to that in a minute. Irrigation. This doesn't exist today. You have a commercial customer that uses water for irrigation only, not agricultural uses, but irrigation. The city will be our biggest irrigation class customer with all of our right-of-way landscaping, medians, those things. Those can, if not managed properly, use a tremendous amount of water. We need to recover that cost. Again, you'll see in the slides that we have, the majority of our irrigation class customers use less than 80,000 gallons. But there are some that use over that. And we need to build a mechanism and have a rate structure to recover those costs. It's unfortunate, but our rate structure is built and our resources are built that our higher-end water supplies are more costly. You know, we're trying to change the way we do business, looking at bringing in Adam and some other things to lower that in the future. But the way it stands today, our most expensive water supplies are disproportionate to our lower cost. That slide I showed earlier was 82 cents is our cheapest, $5.33 is our most expensive. So it's difficult to build a rate base on that. Again, we charge a wastewater a monthly fixed fee. Again, a typical residence, 3/4, 1 inch, has seen some increases. Wastewater volumes. The way we bill wastewater in the city is we take your winter, if you're a resident, we take your lowest 3 months of the year, winter quarter average. It's the usage in December, January, and February, billed in January, February, and March. We take that usage, and if you use 1,000 gallons a month, we take 80% of that, 800 gallons a month, and make that your monthly sewer charge for the entire year. And the thought is, in actuality, when we analyze the data, over 60% of our water in the summertime is used for outdoor purposes, swimming pools, landscape irrigation. You just typically use more water in the summertime than you do in the wintertime. The majority of that water doesn't make its way back into the sewer system. So we fix the rate system in such a way that the winter quarter average is the driver for residential customers. Now, for a commercial customer, it's 80% of the total water consumed. Because again, a typical commercial customer, a big box retailer, the majority of their property is the store or the business. They have minimum landscape irrigation. So the majority of the water that's provided to that property, about 80% of it, comes back to us in sewer flow. So we've built a system in place, and it's the way the sewer system, the way the billing system is set up today, isn't changing. Commercial customers at 80%, residential customers at 80% of the winter quarter average. And with an irrigation class customer, there's no connection to the sewer system, so there's no sewer charges. Irrigation class customers are water only. Again, landscape maintenance. Here's the meat and the potatoes of the presentation. This is what a low-end water user, an average, a high, and a very high water user in the city of Goodyear currently pays. $41.27 is the low. Average customer is about $57, $58, and then you can see high and very high users. As the city manager mentioned in his earlier presentation, we're recommending an increase to $64.50 for our average water customer in the city. When I say average, I'm just going to flip to the next slide quickly. This is the breakdown of water usage. And I apologize, the bottom numbers don't show up, but it starts at 1 and moves to over 20 on the bottom, on the right-hand side. Majority of our customers are at that peak of the bell curve, and that's between 4,000 and 12,000 gallons. So the majority of our customers are in that sweet spot. So we've built a rate structure to provide service to that majority. Now, there are residential customers that use a lot more than 8,000 gallons a month. But we need to build a rate structure to recover those costs, and we've done that. So you can see on a residential bill, the higher-end water users' costs go up, and they go up quite a bit. Again, that's in direct proportion to the expenses we incur to provide that water. Commercial, and this is the residential bill comparison. As the city manager mentioned, Lipsco has filed with the ACC for an increase. They filed their application on March the 9th. Lipscomb staff did notify the city. Its consultant let us know that there was a rate filing in front of the ACC. As of 2 weeks ago, that application has not been accepted. So these are just proposed numbers, and we don't want to, cast any aspersions on the private utility. But what they've requested, the city manager had it a little higher than it was. It was 115.9% increase on water and a 78.7% increase on sewer. And they're looking for about an 11.4% rate of return. So they're looking for a very high rate of return. That's what they've requested. If approved, their rates would be higher than the city of Goodyear's, if approved in 2010 compared to our rates in 2010 as represented on this screen. Lipsco's rates today are currently $42.
Do you mind if I inject a question here, Mayor? Can we look at their rate application, if we haven't already, and determine whether they're trying to recover the costs for mitigating the odor issue? And if they are, submit an objection to that? Because that odor issue, I don't know if I'd have the support, and maybe this is for another meeting at some point, but my concern would be is if they're trying to recover the costs for a condition which they committed themselves to prior to their application, they're looking to pass that cost on to the ratepayer, and in all reality, that corporation ought to be paying for that.
In their application, they list that they've increased their wastewater rate base by about $20 million. So again, we'll provide that report to the city manager as requested by the council in the earlier presentation, and we can absolutely look into that, Vice Mayor. I'll work through the city manager on that, of course.
Makes any sense.
Okay. So this is how our rates compare. I was quoted at one point earlier, a few presentations back, it is what it is, but unfortunately the city's water supplies are more expensive than some of our neighbors. We have an abundance of groundwater in the city of Goodyear. We're blessed with over a sustainable supply of over 100 million gallons a day if we wanted to develop it. The difficulty is it's very expensive to treat the water that we have. And it's the geology, it's the aquifer that's beneath us. We didn't do anything wrong. We're not drilling in the cheap supplies and only drilling in the expensive supplies. We've tapped out all of our low-cost water resources, and the other ones that we had were contaminated. Again, not making an excuse for that. It's just the reality of the situation. So it's caused us to develop and to provide higher-cost water, which drives up our water rates. The city's doing everything it can, and staff through the city manager is doing everything we can to tighten our belt operationally. And it's unfortunate that we have to raise these rates. We've deferred them as long as we can. We defer them. Originally, our intent was to try to raise rates in July of 2008. We've tried to defer that again another 6 months. So we're proposing again January 2010. Again, it's unfortunate, but we will be in the upper tier as listed. But again, other communities are going to catch up to us, and in some cases, utilities may pass us. Commercial bills. Again, an average commercial customer in the city of Goodyear is about 20,000 gallons a month. Their bill is going to go up from $116 a month to $137. And then each year after, you can see that there's increases. How does that compare from a breakdown of how much water our commercial customers use? The majority of our commercial customers use less than 20,000 gallons. There are some commercial customers, you can see way out at the end of that slide, that use 190, 200,000 gallons a month. And we can provide them 190, 200,000 gallons per month. But it'll have to be at a rate that's sufficient to support those expenses. That's the rate structure that we've developed. Again, commercially, we compare very favorably to our communities around us. Our rate structure, the equity, the way that we've developed our rate system. Again, if approved, Lipsco would have the highest rates. They'd be over $209 a month. They're currently at about $98. With the city's proposed increases, we'd be at $137. Again, this is for our average customer, apples to apples comparison. Average for us is 20,000 gallons. So we took that usage, and you did 20,000 gallons in Peoria, 20,000 gallons in Avondale, 20,000 gallons in Surprise. An average customer in Surprise may be 18,000. That's not apples to apples, so we wanted to try to show you that. And we did the same thing at residential. It's 8,000 gallons. That's what an average customer in Goodyear looks like. If that average customer lived in Surprise, that's what their bill would look like. So this is what is representative on the commercial side. Irrigation. This is where we see large volumes of water for our irrigation class customers, really driving up our summer demands. Landscape irrigation is a huge, huge issue. The city's trying to be as proactive as it can. We've done an audit of our facilities. Again, we're our largest customer, so we're trying to maintain and working with Mike Svets in the Park and Recreation Department to lower our water usage, trying to be as efficient as we can. We've offered, and it's on our website, we've offered HOAs free tune-ups in the entire city. We've offered, even if they're not in our service territory, our staff will go out, we'll meet with their grounds folks, we'll look at their irrigation timers, we'll look at the way they water their lawns, water their landscape, and if there's suggestions that we can come up with, and we typically can, to reduce that usage, we're offering that at no cost. And we've had, I think, to date, over 15 HOAs sign up for it. And we'd encourage all HOAs to do it. It's one of the largest water wasters is over-irrigating landscaping. So again, if we can encourage people to cut that down, it will reduce our expenses more than it would reduce the revenues that we'd lose. Because our expenses are so high in the summertime. So anything we can do to reduce that peak is a benefit for everybody. Irrigation class customers, the majority of our customers in those first few tiers fits within that tiered structure that we've proposed. Again, you can see some irrigation customers use a large volume of water, but we've got a rate system in place that'll recover those expenses. So again, in closing, I wanted to be brief. This is what we're recommending. This is what's before you tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Comments from the public? Again, this is a public hearing. Comments from the public?
Mayor, I do have two speakers.
Okay.
The first one is Nancy McFillan.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Nancy McFillan. I live in Australia Mountain Ranch, and I'm very concerned with this increase. I have found out over the past year and a half that the appliances that we have in the majority of our communities are being blown. I moved in June of '06. I have replaced 3 hot water heaters and 3 osmosis systems. My community, which is Mesquite Highlands, is having problems with our pools. We have to drain them, our washers, our dishwashers. I provided you with that information tonight so that you could look over some of the comments from some of our residents. We did come and meet with the mayor and the city manager, and it was decided that they would come out and they would check my water, which they did on the 24th of April. We did a field test that day, and the field test came out at 34 grains per hardness. It was sent to one of the labs, and that came back at 29.23. I attended the water meeting that Sean presented to us, and that evening, before leaving my home, I filled up a bottle of water and took it out of my hose bib, and I asked Sean to test it, which he did, and that came back at 38. Typically, that is the number around our house, somewhere between 38 and 41. My husband tests on a constant basis. It was also decided that the city was going to go and check various different PUEs, and as you can see, that is provided, and Australia has one of the highest at 37.4. So obviously, until the water quality is the same throughout the city of Goodyear, I am not in favor of any increases in Australia. I purchased my home, I upgraded to the best possible softener, and what I'm ending up with is that the softener that has been installed in our homes cannot handle this type of hardness. We received no disclosure information that we would need to be concerned with this when we moved into our community. I'm not sure whether that is a city responsibility, a developer, or a builder. But it's been a failure completely within our community. I don't know what the answer is, but there needs to be a resolution to it. There was a citizens committee that was formed, yet the quality of the water was never asked as far as a task for them to discuss. So I would like a public response as to how this is going to be dealt with. Australia is not going to be a cash cow in this situation. My quality of life matters. I deserve the same you all have, and I want something done about it. Along with the fact I'm not really thrilled about the beautiful building that Water Resources is in. I'm not thrilled with the $990,000 that was approved for the fence, and I'm really unhappy with the $54,000 approved to adorn with art. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Christine Espressione.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christine Espressione. I am a resident of Estrella Mountain Ranch as well, and a neighbor of Nancy. And I have to say, I'm pretty disappointed with the findings of this city as far as our water goes. I moved here in 2006, bought a brand-new home. I've already had a problem with my water heater. And because of this, I have been told by my plumber that it would require me to flush my water heater once a month. So we have the worst water in Estrella Mountain Ranch, and I don't think that's any secret now. But I'll be damned if we're paying Mercedes rates and getting a scooter out of this, if you know what I mean. So while I see Sean Bradford's points about the cost of service, keep in mind that with the horrible water situation we have there, we are forced to drain our water heater. I'm forced to drain my pool more often. We can never keep a pH up there for some reason, and it's because of the hardness of the water. I don't mind paying for services that I get, but in this situation, simply saying that the water is water when Canyon Trails has a water hardness of 10.5 and I have one of 37.4, I have a problem with that as paying the same rate as everyone else. I think that a study needs to be done, and there needs to be a resolution for us as to why we are incurring costs at a 2-year new home site for water heaters, for dishwashers, and we were told, you know, you could possibly be over-softening your water. No, I don't think that's the case. If you would survey our community, you'll find that the people without the softener actually blew before the rest of us. I found that the water softener system, also an upgrade for me, that was put in my home is also not appropriate for my home because of the hardness of the water. So does the city have a responsibility to us as citizens to disclose that the water is so bad that we might be looking at some special equipment? I think so. It's your responsibility. I don't care if it's at a city level or the developer level, but if we have the wrong things in our homes, doing the wrong things, I can't even imagine what lies beneath me. A 2-year-old home, and we've already had problems with Nancy not getting any water flow up to her 2nd floor. You should be outraged, because I am. And to pay an increase, I think at this point, more studies need to be done on the quality of our water that we're paying for. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, and I'll ask the clerk to read Resolution 09-1307 by title only, please.
Adopt Resolution 09-1307, approving the Water Resources Department Cost of Services Study, Phase 3, dated January 2009, completed by Red Oak Consultants, adopting a 4-year water and sewer rate structure and effective dates for the water and sewer rates, and providing for an effective date.
Okay, thank you. Could I have a motion to approve the resolution?
Second.
Motion from Councilmember Souza and a second from Vice Mayor Antoniak. It's open for discussion. Council, comments?
I have a couple questions. First of all, the budget that we just were discussing, is that including the increase in the water rates for 2010?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Okay.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Osborne, just for clarification, it's a half year of the increase.
Right.
The rates are effective in January, so it would only count for half the fiscal year, but yes.
Okay, but it is within that. Some HOAs have discussed the fact that they would like to use reclaimed water, and we do not have the infrastructure to do that, I guess, to certain areas. Do we have within our future plans how we're going to tackle that so that we can use a lesser grade of water for HOAs and their irrigations?
Mayor, Councilmember Osborne, as part of the rate structure, we're proposing a discounted rate for the use of effluent or reclaimed water to mitigate potable water demands for landscape irrigation. The city has, in this current fiscal year's CIP budget, but I think it's a $2 million line item to build a water storage and booster system for the reclaimed system in the central planning area. That's the 157th plant that runs between the Gila River and I-10. And we're looking at increasing our abilities to deliver water to the north to meet future demands. And that's about a $2 million upgrade that we're doing this year. The city has instituted, as part of its impact fees, a line item, a section of the total utility impact fee for reclaimed, and as that fee's collected, there'll be dollars generated that will afford us the opportunity to expand the system to meet new demands. We could, future growth's going to dictate where we put the infrastructure. We want to try to infill as best as we can in the central planning area, and then look to follow the model that Australia has done down in the southern planning area, where they have a fairly robust reclaim system.
Lastly, can you address what the two ladies spoke of the hardness in Estrella, please?
The city has hard water. I had two informational meetings at the request of council, May 5th and May 7th, and it was essentially a condensed version of the presentation. You got a condensed version tonight of the presentation. The city has hard water. Southwestern United States has hard water. It's a function of the geology that the aquifer sits within. Again, it's hard. Hardness is an aesthetic issue. I understand their concern, and I sympathize with it. I've had discussions with both of those residents, and I understand their pain. The city's water supply meets all state and federal requirements. Hardness isn't one of them. There's not a contaminant level that says if you get above this, you have to do something. Hardness for the vice mayor may be more palatable than hardness for the council member, Councilmember Lord. It's purely on an individualistic basis. If you do soften your water, a typical water softener, in the vast majority, I would assume, that's installed in Goodyear, replace the magnesium and calcium that makes up the hard water with sodium. You're replacing it, and you're actually making your water saltier. If you soften your entire water supply going into your home, you could shorten the life. It's in the manufacturer's brochures. You can shorten the life of some appliances because you're providing a hot water heater or a dishwasher with saltier water. Salt corrodes. Again, it's an aesthetic issue. Some people soften, some people don't. Unfortunately, in the valley, probably 60% of homes have water softeners. Most of the people in the valley are, migrants from another part of the country where the water isn't as hard here. It's an unfortunate circumstance, but there's not much that the city can do about it, short of a massive water softening system that would drive costs even further.
And have you spoken to Newland about any kind of documentation that they give to their homeowners when things are purchased?
We haven't, the Water Resources Public Works Department hasn't. We'd be happy to engage Newland in that dialogue. Again, there's certain requirements that they have to divulge, and Harvey's group would probably be better equipped to say what they need to talk about or what they, as far as disclosures. Again, hardness isn't an issue from a regulatory standpoint, but we could certainly engage them in a dialogue. I would argue that we'd engage everyone. No need to single out just one area of the city. Look at that across the board. I'm not sure if we have any authority to make them do that.
Is that on
I
the water
understand.
quality report? Is hardness part of the water quality?
I don't believe so.
Not required by law, is it? Yeah, okay.
Is this just in this area, in this Mesquite Highlands? Because
It's just,
have we been hearing it from other neighborhoods in that area?
it was hard when I
Well,
lived.
hardness is always an issue.
Hardness, no, I know hardness, but I mean to this degree, as other neighborhoods come before you or ask the question.
Nancy has taken the charge. Nancy has taken the charge, and she's brought us information from other residents.
But from that development, from Mesquite Highlands, this is so
I'm
many
not certain
homes.
where those residents were, but the community of Estrella is essentially serviced from the Bullard Water Campus, and that's a blended supply of five water resources that are brought in there, and they're treated with some reverse osmosis, and the majority of that water is delivered to the south. So Estrella essentially is getting a consistent stream of water from those 5 resources, from those 5 wells.
I don't know what I don't think that the law says they have to disclose the hardness of water, unfortunately.
There are other technologies, and I don't mean to interrupt, there are other technologies that you can use that aren't salt-based, but potassium-based, and then you can have regenerative technologies. Those costs drive it up even further. There's regenerative technologies where they actually use like a media to treat the hardness, and it doesn't increase the salinity, but those could run $30, $40, $50 a month in service charges, basically another utility bill.
The questions that I had pretty much answered just recently. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Holland?
Well, this is kind of kudos to the Water Department, because I know that you guys have been dealing with the brine issue all along. Part of the conservation program that we've put into place is to try to encourage people to not use salt-based water softeners. And yet, when I ask people what they use, even with the noise we've made, even with saying some of the things in the movie theaters, remember we had a little marquee in there, even any kind of advice that we give like that, when you get ready to purchase your water softeners, there's no one there to tell you that you're adding more salt to the water supply that's going to have to go through RO, that's going to have to be cleaned and put back out again. So we're really not solving all the problems. And the other thing about the effluent, Sean, and maybe you can kind of help me here, a lot of neighborhoods do use effluent water. And one part of the conservation that we're trying to put in place is to encourage more areas to use artificial turf. Some of the communities already do that. And we noticed our new ball field. In case people were walking up, you probably thought it was real grass as you entered the park area, and it's not. Even though you might see water sprinklers there, they replaced it with artificial turf. So I think, a lot of things we're doing, we have to do it kind of on a slow basis, and it's going to take a while to get all this through. But it just seems like that the hardness of the water, I've never heard that being an issue before. So I'm not real sure what the city's responsibility is there.
Councilmember Cavalier?
Yeah, I guess I need to know, does all of Australia get their water from the same area,
Yes.
from the same wells?
Yeah, the Estrella community has no water resources developed inside of Estrella.
So it all comes from north of the river?
From the central planning area, and the majority of the water, hydraulically, the way the system is built, is a 16-inch water line that runs up Estrella Parkway.
That's our sole water line.
And that water essentially comes from the Bullard Water Campus. There's a 16-inch line that runs down Lower Buckeye Parkway out to Estrella, and then it goes south. And the majority of the water that they see throughout the year is molecules that are originated at the Bullard Water Campus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't realize our hardness was that bad, but I haven't gone through that. Well, I've gone through 3 water softeners because they were also poorly built. There's a lot of water softeners out there that aren't any good, and most of them on the market aren't any good. There's about 2 or 3 that are. When you finally find the right one, doesn't matter if you use salt or potassium, whatever you use, if it's a good water softener, it'll do the job. And your water manufacturers for water heaters recommend that you drain your water heater at least once a month, or once every 6 months anyway, at the most. But we always drain ours. We've always done that. And I'm only on the second set of water heaters, and I've been in the house 12 years. So I thought that was pretty good. And with the new technology in water heaters, they've got new ones out now that have lifetime warranties on that part of it. Then my other question is this. The effluent that comes out of the Corgett Wash, is that still going down? Are we doing anything with that yet?
The effluent that's treated at the Corgett Water, the
Right.
Corgett Water Reclamation Facility is still being discharged into the wash.
Okay.
The plan isn't permitted for Class A plus effluent. The city is funded.
Oh, it isn't?
No, the city has just completed a facilities master plan where we look at the next phase of expansion at that facility, and we're working with the developer on co-funding some improvements to provide Class A plus effluent that we would then enter into the non-potable system in Estrella. All of the effluent that's treated at Rainbow Valley is being put into the system. None of the effluent that's being treated at Corgett is, as of today.
Because we will eventually use all of that effluent for the golf course in Estrella and the area around the lakes, right? And the lakes themselves.
Right now, it's a non-potable system. It uses
Right.
the majority of it's mined groundwater that the developer runs through their waters. They have a couple of groundwater wells that they use for non-potable purposes. But in the future, we'll have hopefully 100% effluent most of the year.
Okay.
Yeah, question on the hardness issue. What type of capital improvement would we be talking about in terms of? When you talked about regenerative technology at the home? I mean, I'm familiar with the one where you can rent
The canisters?
The canister from
Yes.
like Rain Corporation is one of them that comes around and does this, and it's like $30 a month, $35 a month. And is that the kind of technology you're talking about you'd have to have?
I don't think there's a large-scale water softening plant that I'm aware of in the United States. I mean, we'd have to look at a technology. It would be similar technology. The science behind it would be very similar to that.
Okay.
But the cost, I wouldn't even want to venture a guess. It would be very, very costly to try to soften the water that comes from our aquifer.
Okay. And we've tasked you with having a revenue-neutral department, and we've harped on you. I think you've probably taken daggers out of your back at times from us up here on council for harping on you to have a revenue-neutral department. I sympathize. I lived down there myself for 4.5 years. I went through a dishwasher. So, I mean, I know you're talking about pretty hard water. That said, we don't have a federal regulation. I guess, Nancy, is it Michelle? Christine and Nancy, not to put you all on the spot, but if we were to invest, I'm going to put you on the spot, if we were to invest capital improvements in order to soften the water down there, where would you suggest we come up with the money to do that? Art, okay, so $50,000 in art that didn't come out of the capital improvement program nor the water budget. I guess my point is we've got to come up with it from somewhere. So either we look to individual, we look to individual technologies at our home, which are about $35 to $50 a month. You can get individual technologies at your home, or we can put in tens, if not 20s of millions of dollars of infrastructure into the system, of which we have to recoup from somewhere. And the only place for us to recoup it is from your bill. So I know, she's raising her hand. I don't necessarily want to have a public debate, but I guess I didn't hear that on where to recoup that cost. And so we can have that public debate maybe when we come back up for public hearing or on the sidebar, but I'd like to ask, as you're having your dialogue in your communities, think through that and think, where do we recoup the cost? Because the city, as you've heard tonight, I mean, we went through a pretty lengthy debate, is not a bottomless pit. I mean, we're talking about raising sales taxes and other things, and so it's hard to come up with that capital improvement and the money to deal with the hardness. So it's a fact of life we have to deal with in the Southwest United States. I mean, we're hit on arsenic, we're hit on a number of other things in the Southwest United States in our water quality, and it is abnormally high as compared to the rest of the United States, but it's a cost of living here.
Okay, further. Just a quick question. When are you going to start pulling adamant water down there?
The goal is summer 2010. I'm going to say summer, and we can define what summer is later. It may be May, it may be August, but we're looking to bring water resources online in 2010.
That'll help resolve this.
It will help, yes. Our biggest goal is to bring Adamant in, is to offset that RO
Right,
water
and it'll help
for the
this
majority of the
issue.
year, yes.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Sousa.
Aye.
Councilmember Cavalier.
Aye.
Councilmember Lord.
Aye.
Councilmember Holland.
Aye.
Councilmember Osborne.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Antoniak.
Aye.
Mayor Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
Okay, I'd like to ask the clerk to read ordinance 09-1167 by title only.
Adopt ordinance 09-1176, amending Chapter 14 of the Goodyear City Code to add a new water service category, require applications for reclaimed water service, replace pricing for effluent with pricing for reclaimed water, and providing for an effective date.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve that ordinance?
Move the adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
Motion from Councilmember Souza, second from Vice Mayor Antoniak. It's open for discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cavalier.
Aye.
Councilmember Lord.
Aye.
Councilmember Holland.
Aye.
Councilmember Osborne.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Antoniak.
Aye.
Councilmember Sousa.
Aye.
Mayor Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Opportunity now for council members to current events and comments they'd like to. Councilmember Holland.
I had a couple of things I'd like to bring up. Last week, we had folks come to visit our Water Resources Department from the Water Users Association, and I think they were pretty impressed by all the work that we've done since it had looked so bad. A couple of them had been down about 5 years ago, and they just couldn't believe the improvements that we've made, and have made it possible for our folks to continue to work down there without having with their morale intact and become more efficient because they're out of those old trailers that were down there, and the odors have changed a lot too. So it's just, I think they were really impressed with what we had been managed to do with our limited funds. The other thing that happened to me today was that I got invited as a representative of the council to attend a special needs class that attended the baseball game about 6 weeks ago. I think if Parrish is still in here, he'll correct me. About 6 weeks ago, and a lot of them are special needs children coming from the city of Goodyear, and they get bused to the Buckeye School District. And here they had these tickets, and so Parrish helped work it out that we were able to provide peanuts, popcorn, Cracker Jacks, and good old hot dogs, and they were just absolutely thrilled. So I went down there today where they had their little celebration and showed all their pictures that were taken, and had a little girl come running up to me and grab hold of me, and she just said, Brenda Holland, I just missed you so much. And I said, how can you miss me? You've never met me. She said, I just want to say, take me out to the ball game. So, that was worth it. It was worth everything. So I felt really proud to be asked to participate today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do. No.
Osborne.
Actually, this last week I went on a 2-hour tour of the El Rio. And that was pretty cool to see, especially for the future of Goodyear, what our system could be. But most importantly, this week we have graduation. And I'd like to congratulate all of our high school seniors. I want them to realize that they are not finished, that they have college or the military to go on to. And the ones that cannot do either one of those items, that to persevere and that to continue on with their goals. I was very excited this, first of all, I will have to admit, as a mother, but as a council member, I attended 2 very important events this last week. One was the state track and field tournament. And I have to tell you, City of Goodyear has some incredibly talented athletes in our town. And congratulations to Desert Edge and Millennium and Agua Fria and Verado and Estrella Foothills. They all did wonderful. But I also was at the Millennium High School Honor Awards ceremony. And this year, Millennium had their highest amount of scholarships awarded to their students in the sum of at least $8 million. Those are successes that we need to let people know continue to happen in our town. And I was very proud of them all. So I just wanted to leave them with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lord.
Well, I'd just like to congratulate staff on helping with the Green Expo Day. When citizens often say, well, what can I do? How can I help? How can I be a part of the city? This was a prime example of this. The idea began when a group of, from the Environmental Club at Pebble Creek, I asked if they would take the time to be presented a program from GPEC and from our economic development on a bill that is in the Senate at this time on renewable energy tax credit. And from that meeting, we extended that to the Chamber of Commerce, and our mayor sat on a panel there talking about the same bill. And that night, this group from Pebble Creek said, we'd like to help do a Green Day in Goodyear and bring renewable energy vendors in. And that's what they did. And I think the mayor can talk more about this because he did the introduction and thank you to the different companies that were there. So Goodyear citizens do make a difference. It was a great event, and I hope it will grow to where we have more vendors and more people attending next year. And thank you, staff, for all your hard work.
Thank you. Good summary of that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, several weeks ago, I made comment about, in my prayers, about our military. And last week, I attended this meeting through telecommunications. I'm happy to say this evening that not only my events down in Atlanta was the graduation of my granddaughter, but also my grandson came home yesterday from Iraq. And we saw some pictures of him being greeted in Atlanta with his wife and 2 little daughters. Tell you, I'm a man, but I cried. I cried. Thank you, God.
I just want to say, I think it's time to close this meeting. Tonight is the mayor's anniversary, and I think we need to be, anyway, allow him to get away so he can get to his anniversary party.
How many years? 23. Happy anniversary. So, I think Wally and Joe, I think, are still in the crowd, but congratulations on whomever has a victory tomorrow, and appreciate everything you've done and endured over the last several months as you've gone about seeking to join us up here. And also congratulate Joe. He's celebrating 35 tomorrow night, so he gets stuck at a meeting, and all Joe's going to be doing is checking his phone at dinner tomorrow night. So.
Okay. Okay, for the city manager.
Nothing this evening, Mr. Mayor. I'll let you go home.
Okay, any questions of staff by council?
Let's go.
Did I get you?
No, I